Now, one of the last things I wanted to talk about with you were the different types of audio files that you will oftentimes see in a project. Now, these are digital audio file types, okay? And we divide them into two categories, non-compressed and compressed. Let's talk about some of the non-compressed audio file types. The most common is one that's called a WAV file. Now, WAV files were invented by the PC manufacturers, Microsoft specifically, as their professional audio or audio file type that they would use in computing. Not to be outdone, in the early days of the Apple and PC wars, the Apple folks came up with their own audio file format called AIFF. Now, the WAV and the AIFF formats are still the most popular non-compressed, full frequency, professional quality audio file types. So when you open a Pro Tools session, the first thing it's going to ask you is what type of file would you like to have Pro Tools support? And you're going to choose WAV or you're going to choose AIFF. Now, in the early days, because Apple was the underdog at the time, they made sure that their machines could also read WAV files. However, at that time, PCs could not read AIFF files. So for that reason, because you had cross-platform compatibility in the AIFF, and WAV file formats, WAVs became the preferred file format. So that's likely to appear on a test in your near future. Which file type would you consider to be the standard, WAV or AIFF? And it's WAV, and the reason why is because it's readable by both PCs and Apple-based machines. The next file type we're going to talk about real briefly is a file type called SD2. SD2 was developed by the parent company of Pro Tools at the time, which was DigiDesign, and they had their own proprietary digital audio file type that they called a Sound Designer 2 file. These Sound Designer 2 files were used specifically in early Pro Tools sessions. Some other digital audio workstations also supported that file type. It's kind of a defunct standard now. If you open an old Pro Tools session, it will ask you if you want to convert the files from SD2 into either WAV or AIFF, depending on the format that you're using in your session. Another file type that is a non-compressed file type is called an acidized WAV. Well, what in the world is an acidized WAV? Well, you know half of what it is already because it says it's a WAV file. So it is indeed an actual WAV file that we've done something to. We've acidized it. What that means is that we have added metadata to that WAV file. Now, what is metadata? Metadata is information about the WAV file that might be helpful to the end user. That information may include things like the original tempo of the audio file, how many bars and beats the audio file is. You know, if it's a drum loop, is it 2 bars long? Is it 4 bars long? And what tempo is it recorded at? The third thing it might contain will be what we call markers or tags. And these markers or tags are placed at the beginning of each transient. And you may go, I'm not sure what a transient is, Todd. Drums are the best examples of transients because they have very strong transients. If you look at these drums, you can see exactly where the beat is. It's right there. That's where the beat starts. Here's where the snare drum starts. Here's where another bass drum starts. Okay, it's easy to see these transient. Here's a transient up here. It's another synthetic bass drum part. Okay, you can see exactly where the toms play as well. There are the toms. Easy transients to detect. what an acidized wave file does is it puts little markers in front of each of these transients. So if this is the bass drum signal, and then this is the snare drum, this is the bass drum signal, the snare drum again, what it does is it places a little marker in front of there. And what those markers are used for is for stretching or compressing the audio file. And when you stretch and compress an audio file, then if it knows the tempo of the beat, and it knows how many beats and bars that beat or that rhythm is, then it can compress that audio or speed it up or slow it down. Now, you may go, okay, how do you speed up or slow down a piece of audio in the old days? How did you do that with a piece of analog tape? Well, if you were trying to speed up a rhythm, you would make the tape go faster. But if you made the tape go faster, what would happen to the pitch? The pitch would also raise. So essentially then, the pitch and tempo of a piece of music or a rhythm were interlinked. If you had a tempo and a pitch, and you wanted to raise the tempo, you also were going to raise the pitch. Conversely, if you wanted to drop the tempo, you were also going to be dropping the pitch. With an acidized wave file, what you can actually do is say, I want the tempo to go up, but I want the pitch to remain the same. Also, you could say, if I want the pitch to drop, I don't want the tempo to drop, I want it to remain the same. So you have effectively decoupled tempo and pitch. That's what an acidized wave file does. It allows you to decouple the tempo and the pitch so that they are both independent from each other. Okay, so there I'm actually taking this wave file, playing it at one tempo, so I can take the exact same drum loop, and in this case I can speed it up without changing the pitch. That's what an acidized wave file does, as opposed to doing it this way. Which is raising the pitch. Okay, so that's what an acidized wave file does. It decouples the tempo from the pitch. Okay, so looking back at our diagram here, we have our non-compressed files, waves, which were originally made by the PC manufacturers, AIFF, which were made by Apple as a competitor to the wave file, SD2, which is a defunct file type that was used by early versions of Pro Tools, and then an acidized wave file, which effectively decoupled tempo from pitch. Now there are a variety of compressed format file types as well. Some of these file types are ones that you are very familiar with. There's an MP3, there's MP4, there's a FLAC file, and another file called OGG-Vorbis. And some of these are more obscure, these two especially are a little more obscure files that really you don't need to know about and are not used that often. One of the file types that is called a REX file. A REX file has the same functionality as an acidized wave. It allows you to decouple tempo and pitch. Okay, it does it in a different way, but it has essentially the same functionality. It was developed by a company in Sweden called Propellerhead Software, and they're also responsible for developing a couple of widely used programs in the industry, one called Recycle and another called Reason. So if you've heard of those, they're the same ones who developed the REX file format. So a common quiz question might be, which of the following file types are compressed or are non-compressed? You may ask, what's the difference between this compressed file and a non-compressed file? Well, you remember how we talked about compression in the basic signal path? We said we were essentially reducing the dynamic range. We were raising the floor or dropping the ceiling of an audio signal. Well, we're not really raising the floor and dropping the signal or dropping the ceiling and squashing the signal. What we are doing is raising the floor, dropping the ceiling, or compressing the size of the file. So when we're talking about non-compressed files or compressed file types, we're talking about the size of the file. So if you compare, if you take, for example, a 10 megabyte WAV file and you compress it and make a MP3 file, it may be, I don't know, 1 to 2 megabytes in size as opposed to 10. Okay, MP4 is also a compressed file format, but it's a more recent format, and so the algorithms, however you spell algorithms, I don't know. The algorithms that it uses are much superior. So the size of the file may be roughly the same, but it uses better, higher quality algorithms to decide which part of the digital audio file it's going to keep and which part it's going to throw out. That's how they're able to reduce the file size. Is the quality the same? No, it's not. An MP3 does not sound as good as a full frequency WAV file. Okay, MP4s sound a little better, but still not as good as a WAV file. There are a few other lossless versions. Apple has one that's called an AAC format, and they say that there is no degradation of quality, and you can't tell the difference between this file format and a true WAV file. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's mainly what they sell on iTunes is AAC or MP3 versions. So that is a brief description of digital audio terminology, and in this section, all of these different file types, how they're used, what their functionality is, and what their quality is. And thanks for watching this tutorial. We'll see you on the next one.